Apothiki has nothing to do with pharmacy. So if you send me a message or I send you a message, I might end up in a spam filter because some system somewhere thinks that I'm selling blue pills, which I'm not. Apothiki is actually a translation, or is the Greek original word for storage place for precious goods, which meant for 700 years in the space I'm talking about, and which I bought about 12 years ago, which meant for the Greeks and for the people on the island of Paros that it was olive oil, herbs and wine, which we found plenty of all of it when we got the space as our property. To be honest, we didn't really think of making it an art center from the beginning. We were thinking of inviting people from our networks from the previous decades. But of course, very quickly, because of the artist community on the island, we came to a different idea. To be short, it took me 5 years to finish the building, 2.5 years paperwork, 2.5 years restoration. And we are now in our 7th season. Some more figures is that we had more than 250 artists from 24 countries, and as I said, from different disciplines. What is also important is that we are not a gallery type A, which means I don't have a stable of artists which I'm promoting all over the world and signing contracts with. We do have gallery activities among other activities, but we try to keep it as broad as possible. More and more we put attention to the residency aspect because we believe there is a high potential. There's 15,000 people living on the island of Paros in the Cíclades. It has a very rich historical background, history, starting with the Cycladic art, I'm sure you're familiar with, but also in the 50s and 60s, and again today with a very strong international artist community. Out of season, 15,000, in the high season, which is getting shorter and shorter, which is part of the discussion which is going on in Greece in general and on the island in particular, on what to do with making longer seasons or doing other things when the high tourist season is not happening. Out of season is about, in high season, during 6-7 weeks, is about 150,000 people on the island. Which means that for 90% of the time, you have something like 130,000 rooms and beds available. Now, there's no such a big campus in the world with such a potential besides UCLA, maybe, and Beijing University together. But it shows that, and it's not only the case for Paros, I'm sure our friends from Crete in the room and other islands are aware, especially because of the mild climate and the attractivity of the nature. We are aware that much more can happen for people that particularly seek to run away, as it has been pointed out, from the mass tourism, that for particular reasons come to Paros because of the light in some seasons, because of the rough winds, but also because of the history, not only art as I described before, but also archaeology and the link between contemporary developments and the past. I want to pick on the slides, I want to pick up something on the slide from Professor Richards on when he came to prospects. What is needed to create this type of initiative? You need to be in agreement with local authorities. You need to be accepted by the local people without becoming, and I'm a Belgian national, I'm sorry, so I'm not Greek, without becoming an instrument or becoming a blind part of a policy, local policy. You need to be independent, if you can, in this case, because once you get swallowed into the local developments, you might end up doing things that you were not planning before, and you might be going into a kind of an implosion situation. Secondly, you need this artistic history of the place and the presence of artists, who of course interact. They are all in competition with each other per definition, which is also something I learned. It's not only in politics that you're in competition, but also as an artist, of course, you have to fight for your place and for your survival. And the third thing you need is a number of crazy people like myself that put their saving monies in such a project. The most important thing is that this interaction between these three elements is extremely interesting to see. And since I'm spending half of my time in Paros and the rest in interesting meetings like this, or in Brussels, Professor Richards was right in pointing out that very often the local authorities and the local planning responsibles, or policymakers, or tourist planners, or town planners, they don't see these developments. And this is true everywhere, except for the big cities, because then you have, of course, the academics who can support you with this type of things, or the think tanks. But you don't have it in smaller places. Sometimes things are happening which you only realize later on what the potential is. And it's very difficult for local authorities to take the distance from in this case, from an island, which is an additional element, and to judge what can be done to make things even better. I will conclude by saying that I think the interesting thing here is the performing, and I'm sorry I didn't have more pictures because of the internet connection not being so well, but you can also go to our Apothiki website. The interesting thing we're doing now is the residencies. We are part of an international network, it's called the Resartis, it's based in Amsterdam. It's about 250 centers, which are very similar than Horst. Some of them are big castles, some of them are huge buildings in Korea, Japan, supported by the town or by the government. Some of them are smaller, like in my case. We can host 200-300 people for an opening reception, about 100 people for a conference, to give you an idea. And we are situated in the old part of the town. But Resartis is a very interesting network to look at. Because I think they combine the use of space with creating opportunities, and by doing so also influencing new ways of tourism and networking. Artist mobility is of course one interesting thing we should look at, I guess, in one of the workshops. You have others. You have Alliance of Artist Communities in the United States, which is more or less North American oriented, but very strong and very well organized. And you have also organizations like Art Factories, which are taking over all gas stations and power station, which is a feeling of freedom and mobility in a positive sense, but sometimes underestimated. So it takes a number of days in order to get ready to that. Also in the reverse way, if you leave the island after 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, I would say the quote of my former secretary in New York when I was with the United Nations. She always blocked the 2-3 days that I was back in the office with the excuse that Dirk has PPP. And in the beginning I didn't, so what she meant is I had the post-Paros syndrome. If you're back in a small office without sitting outside all day and night and not enjoying nature. So this is the motivation of most of the residents. What is important, since my colleagues give a very quick practical thing, what is important is how we function. We encourage people to find their own funding, to be honest. So we are not, I'm not from a rich family which has a foundation with tax-free donations and stuff like that. I wish it was true. We work on a non-profit basis, but we try to avoid losses, so we ask a reasonable fee depending on the season and depending on the services that the artist or the group of artists expects from us. But any proposal is welcome, and I'm very much looking forward to discuss with you some funny and less funny cases during coffee and elsewhere. Thank you very much.